I'm now going to read out some concluding remarks and a draft interim judgment. It is draft, and therefore it is not authoritative. The authoritative version of this judgment will appear on the website in a few days. The 3 days of hearings from witnesses from around the world are now concluded. As forecast in my opening remarks, the Tribunal has, in the course of hearing witnesses, started its investigatory function, and there will be a further hearing or hearings by one means or another to complete the reception by the Tribunal of additional witnesses or documentary evidence identified by the Tribunal itself as possibly valuable, including those documentary materials sought from witnesses during their testimony. Once that material has been considered, the Tribunal will deliver, in public, its judgment, and it is hoped that that will happen in the spring of next year. The necessary passage of time until then will allow the People's Republic of China to reconsider the invitations it has received, but to which it has made no reply, and to consider participating in the proceedings as it still could. Named doctors who have expressed views favourable to China and who have so far declined invitations to assist the Tribunal may reconsider their position, and it is hoped that they will. The call for evidence on the China Tribunal website remains open, and so members of the public may contribute statements or indeed identify further witnesses or evidence that the Tribunal may wish to consider. ETAC and the Tribunal remain aware of the need to have access to individuals who, or material that, suggests nothing criminal has been involved in China's organ transplant practices, and the panel would be grateful for notification of the names of any such exculpatory testimony of individuals or written material that it may not yet have had drawn to its attention. It will be further recalled that none of the many reports into China's transplant practices have explored specifically whether those practices have involved international criminal offences, although often asserting that they may have done. And also, it's to be recalled how people's tribunals typically deal with allegations of extremely serious crimes by states or state-supported bodies that, as in this case, formal national and international bodies have failed to deal with. This tribunal, as will be recorded, is investigating if criminal offences have been committed by state or state-approved bodies or organisations or individuals in China that or who may have engaged in forced organ harvesting. Further, it will be recalled that any finding without qualification that commission of crimes has been proved completely will, in due course, be based on the tribunal members being satisfied of such a finding beyond reasonable doubt. Our findings, one way or the other, if any made at a lesser level of certainty, will be explained in the judgment. It is not for the tribunal to be concerned with the use to be made of its judgment, which is primarily for ETAC. Nevertheless, it cannot be missed by anyone remotely familiar with the allegations made over the years about forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience, that repeated findings adverse to the People's Republic of China may have had little, if any, effect on such practices. Similarly, it is not for the tribunal to focus too much of its attention on how practices in the People's Republic of China contravene international norms or shock the conscience of humanity, to quote the preamble of the Statute of the International Criminal Court. It is for this tribunal to do its work according to its mandate, which is to investigate what crimes if any, have been committed by practices in the People's Republic of China as established by evidence presented or called by the tribunal, and nothing else. Nevertheless, the tribunal cannot overlook that in the modern world, where countries and their citizens are all interconnected by choice, through trade and in other ways, public pronouncements critical of the conduct of one country, may possibly have some effect on that country directly or indirectly by informing other countries and their citizens that connect with it and thereby support it. Now, normally, a tribunal like ours would not issue a partial or interim judgment, but would wait until all relevant decisions have been made and issue its final judgment. Different considerations may apply where issuing a partial or interim judgment may serve the public good. Unusually, therefore, and for a specific reason that will follow, the tribunal announces its decision now on one fact only of the many that will have ultimately to be considered in the question asked of the tribunal. We, the tribunal members, are all certain, unanimously and sure beyond reasonable doubt, that in China, forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience has been practiced for a substantial period of time, involving a very substantial number of victims. We will deal in our final judgment with our finding as to whether any international crimes have been committed by this practice, if so by whom, and with detail as to the time periods concerned and the numbers of victims, which will all be derived from further analysis of present evidence and other material yet to be provided, and to the legal advice yet to be received. But, to repeat, it is beyond doubt that forced harvesting of organs happened on a substantial scale and by state-organized or approved organizations and individuals. Without reference to criminality, it can be asserted, not insignificant perhaps, on Human Rights Day today, the very day that celebrates 70 years ago the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that the practice as evidenced to us is in breach of, as a minimum, articles of the Universal Declaration as follows. Article 3, the right to life. Article 6, recognition as a person before the law. Article 7, equality before the law. Article 9, not to be subject to arbitrary arrest. Article 10, full equality to a fair and public hearing in determination of rights. Article 11, presumption of innocence. Article 5, torture, is also shown to have been breached by witnesses who were called principally to help with evidence of events in prisons of unaccountable medical testing, consistent with preparation of individuals for organ harvesting, all bar one of whom were themselves tortured. Our judgment on this single issue shows that we have been driven by the evidence that we have received to certainty of mind that these things have been done on a very large scale over a long period of time. But we reached this decision without the assistance of those who might have advanced evidence to a contrary effect. It must be clearly understood that any such evidence coming later from doctors, from academics, from government officials, whoever, will be considered, just as it would have been considered were it to have been heard over the last 3 days. It should also be fully understood that this is not a case where it is not the case that every witness before us has given evidence that is supportive of the very particular and single conclusion that we've reached, because some witnesses have given factual evidence that, without being doubted as to its credibility, takes that central issue no further. But this explains why a partial interim judgment now is appropriate, given the potential as above for public pronouncements critical of the conduct of one country to have some effect on that country directly or indirectly by informing countries and individuals that connect with it and thereby support it. We have to have in mind, to repeat, how accounts of reports of forced harvesting in China, even those that have touched on criminality, have not, so far as is known, have much effect. It is possible that the clear and certain finding we make beyond reasonable doubt about this practice, although not by itself and at this stage a finding of any international criminal liability, will have a direct effect on the People's Republic of China or on those with whom it interacts, who should, once aware of our judgment or aware of the practice by any other means, check support they effectively give to China by engaging with that country unless they have the practice in respect of which we have made our judgment at the forefront of their minds. We should all perhaps reflect on how the oxygen of publicity given to the allegations made in general about these practices and supported now to the limited extent it is by our judgment today, that oxygen of publicity may allow the real oxygen of life to continue for those who might otherwise be killed. Such a possible outcome, slight as the probability and arguably remote, but certainly possible, makes it not only appropriate for us to record our present certainty about the forced organ harvesting practice, but makes it a duty publicly to do so now, because it being conceivable that it may save innocents from harm. Reflecting on our several duties to fellow citizens of the world, we can properly remind ourselves of past atrocities where states sought destruction of part of their communities. And we can remind ourselves of the part played in those events as they unfolded when others were silent. Dangerous concepts of sovereignty that might now allow other countries to do within their own borders to their own citizens what they like, regardless of humanity being a single family protected by essential and codified rights, have to be confronted. And by confronting such dangerous concepts with clear and certain decisions, such as ours in respect of forced harvesting, may bring change. Our final judgment will, as explained, be announced in due course. As explained during the hearings, material added to that which we've considered and coming from witnesses will be posted onto the website, as will information about any future hearings. Those future hearings are perhaps unlikely to be in-person hearings such as here. They might be by the internet, and we will do our best to make them available. So those interested are invited to keep an eye on the website, and we'll do our best to ensure that it is kept up to date on a relevant basis, on a swift basis. Thanks. It might be thought that there are a large number of thanks to be given, and certainly thanks or recognition, by whatever term you regard as appropriate, should be given to all those witnesses who you judge and we judge have shown fortitude, courage, maybe beyond our own conception of what would be possible in us, in surviving the events they describe and then coming and telling us about it. So if the word thanks is appropriate, then it is most certainly appropriate to them. Are other thanks due? And if so, from whom should the thanks come? Well, not from ETAC, who are doing what they choose to do, nor from the tribunal, who is doing its work. Thanks are, I suppose, due from those, or the relations of those, who are no longer with us, but who have suffered as a result of this practice. Thanks are probably due from the general public, whose interest is in seeing this practice end. That is where the thanks should come from, and not from any individuals. Nevertheless, so far as the tribunal is concerned, it has to express its extreme gratitude to the volunteers who have assisted Mr. Sabi in preparation of and throughout the hearing, making what was an extremely difficult exercise in gathering evidence by different means from around the world so coordinated and smooth and efficient that we, the tribunal, were in the happy position of being able to hear, receive, and consider evidence in the most convenient way possible for us. This tribunal hearing is now adjourned.